Hey, how's it going? Just a quick video on what I find to be one of the best mid-game tanking builds so far. The build itself employs a high life pool, high armor and decent crowd controlling measures. It uses the sword and shield combination together with the war hammer. It is best suited for a group scenario due to the lack of self-sustain you would get from a live staff instead. The attribute distribution is as follows. For attributes, we mainly choose Constitution, focusing on getting the second milestone passive, which grants us a maximum health increase by 10% of our physical armor. For added damage, which comes in handy while leveling, you can also allocate some points into strength, since all our weapons scale off strength. Gear. Tying into that, I would recommend equipment that complements the aforementioned stats. The gear you are looking for is heavy armor and has the name suffix of the barbarian. It features strength as well as constitution. While leveling, the equipment sold by the respective faction vendors is preferable since it does have a decent stat allocation. At mid-level, the shield you are using should be a kite shield since it features a high block stability compared to the round shield, with the trade-off being that you lose out on damage. Both your weapons should follow the rules we have established as well. Make sure that you have a gem socket. That's vitally important. This enables you to slot a so-called Cornelian gem into them, which turns some of your abilities into taunts. More on that later. Weapon skills. Weapon mastery is up next. Let's start off with our main tanking weapon. Most of our survivability and our actual tanking capabilities will come from that. We will mainly be focusing on the defender tree, since most of the abilities located here benefit our tanking role the most. Our main three skills will be Shield Rush, which is mainly used for mobility purposes and for an added knockback, which does come in handy occasionally. Shield Bash, one of our three abilities with taunting capabilities. Shield Bash does minor damage, but applies a 2-second stun to the enemy hit. If enemies are stood extremely close together, Shield Bash can even hit multiple opponents. The stun gives us the option to control enemies a bit better when engaging in combat. As I had alluded to earlier, Shield Bash also works in conjunction with the Cornelian gems socketed into your weapons. If Shield Bash hits an enemy, it applies the taunt status for 6 seconds, causing said enemy to focus its attacks on you for the specified duration. Defiant Stance. This is our big survivability cooldown, applying a 30% damage reduction to us for 8 seconds. Additionally, once we trigger Defiant Stance, it also functions as an area of effect taunt for 6 seconds within an 8-meter radius. Okay, so these are the abilities we take, but what about passive abilities, you ask? Well, fear not, I'll tell you right away. In the Defender tree, we take Sturdy Grip. The stamina reduction while blocking comes in handy in case you want to mix it up with an occasional dodge. In the second row, we invest into defensive training, granting 10% fortify for 5 seconds when you block. As far as I understand, Fortify just translates to another 10% overall damage reduction. The Fortify effect itself has a cap of 50%, meaning if you were to get it from several sources, exceeding the 50% threshold would not be beneficial. For the third row, we take the Intimidating Bash passive, which causes our Shield Bash to generate even more threat. As for the fourth row, we allocate 1 point into Final Blow, enabling our third attack of the Sword's Light attack chain to generate more threat. As an added bonus, we also deal a little bit more damage. Now we make a quick detour into the Swordmaster side of the Sword and Shield tree and grab the Achilles Heel passive. This pairs well with Final Blow and applies a 2-second slow to every enemy you hit with your third light attack. So back to the Defender tree we go and grab the Fortitude and Recuperation passives for obvious reason, granting us overall more health and survivability in combat. As our backup weapon, we took the Warhammer previously. You'll obviously be less resilient with the weapon drawn in combat, but what you lose in resilience you make up for in crowd controlling. Our abilities will be as follows. Armor Breaker, a high damage attack penetrating 35% of your target's armor and dealing 140% weapon damage. That's basically it, nothing fancy, just damage. Alternatively, you could also take the Clear Out ability. While it does less damage, it adds a 4-meter knockback to your attack. This ability is literally hit or miss, in my opinion. When employed correctly, it can be extremely beneficial to you and your group's survival. On the other hand, it is also prone to mess-ups such as knocking enemies out of carefully placed area of effect damage abilities deployed by your teammates. I'd suggest taking whichever ability you feel comfortable with. Next up, Wrecking Ball. It deals 120% weapon damage and flattens your enemy. Well, colloquially speaking, it knocks them on their asses. It's decent crowd control on a rather short cooldown. Lastly, Shockwave, our third taunt. When paired with a Carnelian gem in the Warhammer, Shockwave strikes everything in a 3-meter radius for 80% weapon damage, and that's the important part, applies taunt for 6 seconds and also stuns for 2 seconds. Honestly, this might be the main reason you would want to offhand the Warhammer for tanking, since you do have a pretty reliable taunt here as well. For passive abilities, I would recommend taking the Outnumbered passive in row 1 of the Crowd Crusher tree. It grants 10% damage absorption when being surrounded by 2 or more enemies within 3 meters of you. Pretty self-explanatory really. The less damage you take, the longer you live, which makes you a better tank. Over in the Juggernaut tree, we take the row 2 passive Hardened Steel, which adds grit and a 20% damage reduction to our Warhammer heavy attacks. Grit makes your heavy attacks uninterruptible, and the 20% damage reduction helps you not keel over that easily when charging up those heavy bonks. Last but not least, I would recommend getting the Exhaustive Attacks passive, enabling all Warhammer attacks to apply the exhaust effect, thus slowing stamina regeneration by 15% for enemies affected by the status. Although I'm not 100% certain if this works on NPCs, this should be particularly useful in group content to drain the stamina bars of some nasty elite enemies, resulting in faster downed states and less rampaging. I'm especially referring to these beefy dudes in the Amrine excavation dungeon. Lastly, we take the Quick Recovery passive, which grants us 7% cooldown reduction for each heavy attack, effectively giving us the option to actively reduce our cooldowns for the hammer, and that should cover it all. Now you just need to apply your knowledge in-game, and leading your group into battle should not be an issue. Thanks for watching, bye bye.